Going to try again. Good morning. I'm Reverend Trish Hall, and it is my privilege to serve this morning, to serve the family as we come together to honor Rajna. And Raja, as everyone knows, is such a prominent existence within all of us, all people whose lives have been touched by him. And so thank you for being here today to celebrate his life, the life of such an amazing individual, and to reaffirm our faith in life eternal. At this time, we bless him as he expands into his next expression of spiritual experience. This service is dedicated to rekindling memories of love and life. And so if you will join me in a centering prayer. And so we come together at this time, and we find stillness within. And in that stillness, we find that our hearts that have gone through so much are falling open as love. That the embrace of one another, the embrace of Raja, the embrace of life itself. And so from that place of stillness, from that place of centeredness, we recognize that Spirit itself is expressing in, as, around, through, and throughout all it is. We recognize the immortality of life, the eternality of life. And so we bless each and every person who has come to be here. We bless each and every person whose lives have been touched by this magnificent being. And so in this space of embrace, we say thank you, life, thank you, Creator, thank you, Divine Spirit, for making this person available to encounter all here, for all that will ripple out and continues to ripple out as a result of this experience. And so in gratitude and blessing, we simply release this prayer. We release this centering, knowing it is so, and so it is. And so at this time, I invite Carol and Rachna and Shanta to come forward and light the flame. Shashim, with you. Yes. We are using a flame to commemorate as an eternal flame, as the flame of life that Raja brought to everyone. And so blessings on him, blessings on all. And I now invite Kathy Cook to come forward with a native blessing and to speak briefly.
We are joined as family. We are joined as friends. We are joined through Raja. We join in our grief, and we join to celebrate his life.
Thank you, Kathy. And so Raja passed from this life experience into whatever expression of spirit comes next on Sunday, March 22nd. He is survived by his wife and colleague, Carol Baldwin, daughters, Rachna, Shanta, and their mother, Rashmi. He was predeceased by his parents. Everyone here knows that he was a college professor, university professor at George Mason, that he served as program director, that he had accumulated honors and was lauded by people around the world. And with all of those credentials, those are the wanderings through fact, through data. And Raja was so much more than facts and data. Raja was a transformative force that affected and uplifted and altered the lives of many. He was an excellent father, a friend, a mentor, a chef, a musician, and lover of food, wine, and fun. He loved music, and one of his favorites was Field of Gold. Thank you. And now, Shanta, if you would come forward.
Can everyone hear me in the back? Okay.
Microphone is there.
Yeah. I thought I would be writing something like this at least 20 years from now, and that makes this hard. So hard that sometimes I'd rather not think about my dad, or Appa as I call him, and what happened. I wish I didn't feel like this, but it's only because it's not possible for me to love a person more than I love him. I am grateful, though, at what an amazing father he was and how wonderful my relationship was with him, because I know many people don't get to have that. He was such a kind and goofy person, so I thought I could talk about some of the silliest memories I've had with him over the years. We all know he was an avid music lover. He particularly liked blues music and was a fan of the Blues Brothers movies as well. I watched them with him probably when I was a little too young, because I unconsciously happened to pick up on an inappropriate phrase beginning with the word son of a that were used in the film. I remember the words unknowingly falling out of my mouth while playing with friends in the basement and the looks on their faces when I did. I felt so terrible that I ran up to the kitchen where he was cooking and I told him what had happened. He didn't even blink an eye because he didn't think it was a big deal, so I went into my room and hid with such shame in my closet for an hour as self-punishment. He also loved reggae music, and when we would dance to it in the living room, he would tell us to put peanut butter on our feet to stick them to the floor so we could only use our hips to move. And a reggae Christmas album was something that we played every December. I also saw my first Broadway musical with him. It was The Drowsy Chaperone when I was 16 on a New York trip together. I had just gotten my wisdom teeth out, so I had these big chipmunk cheeks, but I didn't care. I was so excited, and I left the show with an aching face from smiling so much. He loved seeing theater, and when I went into his room last week, it made me feel so good to see that he had saved all of the programs of shows that I've done, including college productions he had flown all the way over to see. The last show I did was full of music. I played guitar and even the upright bass while on stage, and I know he would have loved it if he had been able to see it. I studied theater at Indiana University in Bloomington. It's a small college town with nothing much else around, and Indianapolis is an hour away. The first time I visited with my dad a few years ago, we flew. Everything was going fine until we heard the flight attendant come on the PA system and announce that we were beginning our descent into Bloomington, Illinois. I was so mad at him. How could he accidentally book a flight to the wrong state and never realize? My mom and sister call him an absent-minded professor, and this was definitely one of those moments. We ended up having to rent a car and drive several hours through the night to Indiana. He drove while I slept after a significant amount of sulking. Another time I got upset with him, but which makes a great story now, is when he cut my bangs in the second grade. He must have been very persuasive because I allowed it, letting him snip away while I was plopped down on the toilet seat. And I don't know how someone is so incapable of cutting in a straight line. I was simply appalled. If you ever see an old picture of me with extremely crooked bangs, you'll know who was responsible. Appa and his sister Saroj also loved playing tennis. Our Bethesda home is right next to a park, so sometimes he would take me to hit the ball around. One time, and I'm not making this up, he was serving from across the court and the ball flew across the net and landed in my mouth. I don't know how this happened. My mouth must have been open. I had a couple sores inside my cheek, and I remember him being so confused as to why I just watched this happen instead of hitting the ball with my racket or moving away. And finally, my last fond moment with him was in the ICU a few days before he passed. For about 4 days, he had been alert, sitting up, and even talking softly. I told him all about the auditions I'd been going on, and it was just my typical silly self. I always remember the last time I made him smile. I joked that I was so proud of myself for not having used his credit card for a whole 2 months. I'm so glad I got to spend some time with him when his eyes were open and he was engaged and responsive to what I was saying. He was a truly incredible fighter. Lastly, I wanted to close with this. I found this poem by Emily Dickinson that he had written down in a journal many, many years ago that I thought was appropriate to read. And it goes, "If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one lonely person into happiness again, I shall not live in vain." Thank you.
Thank you, Shanta. Thank you so much, Shanta. Such a creative life. And it's interesting that poems and writings have come up so much. And his friend Nick Mosey, who is in Australia, sent in a poem to be read as well. And this is an excerpt from a poem by Mary Oliver called When Death Comes. When death comes like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse, I want to step through the door full of curiosity and wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement, and I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something in particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I want to end up simply I don't want to end up having simply visited this world. And he certainly didn't just visit this world. And so now, if Dr. Tyler Shaw will come forward, he's friend and colleague and
Good morning. Can everyone hear me in the back? Good. Louder. Gotcha. While this is a difficult day, the sun shines bright. Today we lay to rest a good friend and mentor to us all. What you will hear today, we hope captures your sentiments and love for a man that was truly dear to all of us. I, for one, am truly humbled to honor Raja Paraserman. Carol would like for me to say a few words of thanks to some key groups of people who've been extraordinarily helpful during this time. First, to Shanta, Rachna, Rashmi. I know that this affects you beyond words can describe. Truly sorry for your loss. I hope you find solace in the fact that Raja was loved by many, and importantly, he had much love for you. To the Department of Psychology at George Mason University, the outpouring of love and support has been nothing short of amazing. Thank you to Susan Ridley for lending us your strength and remarkable talents of organization. Thank you to the Department Life Committee of the Psychology Department for helping to organize food and warmth. Thank you to all of Raja's friends and colleagues at GMU who are there to provide hugs and warm words when they are so desperately needed. To the Human Factors graduate students and the HFES student group of George Mason, thank you for continuing to blow us away with your leadership and your ability to mobilize resources at a moment's notice. Thank you for having the courage and confidence to do what you feel is your duty to honor our great friend. Thank you to Raja's colleagues and friends around the globe, some of whom will speak today. Thank you for your emails, phone calls, support, and your love. From me and from all of us, to Carol and family, thank you for being amazing. Your strength during this time is truly inspiring. This is hard, and it will continue to be hard, but know that you are loved. That so many people are in attendance today is a testament to how much Raja was loved and respected. Raja was indeed a great man who accomplished a great many things during his time on this earth. As such, there are so many things that I could say about him. What I want to do today is just to say a few words about my personal experience with the man, because he left quite an impression on me. I first met Raja at a Human Factors conference in 2006. He approached me and we had a very long discussion about the perks of a career in academia. A discussion that I'm sure he's had with many of you. So at the time, I was strongly committed to my goal of going into private industry. And for every point that I made in defense of that goal, Raja had a counterpoint that I hadn't considered. And at the end of that conversation, Raja said, "You'll make the right decision." course, 2 years later, he recruited me to become his postdoc, and I began my career in academia. During the time that I've known him, Raja has been a great many things to me. To me, Raja was a mentor, a good mentor. Like most good mentors, Raja had a talent of seeing more flaws in me than I would have liked. When he gave me advice or feedback, which was always wrapped in so much wisdom, it was sometimes not always what I wanted to hear. I recall my first couple of months as Raja's postdoc. I was still trying to get settled, and Raja and I had hammered out some project ideas. I would often have what I considered to be small victories, where I'd figure out a programming issue that was giving me trouble or getting IRB approval, and I would go to Raja and I'd tell him, look what I did. And Raja would say, Tyler, that's great, but where's the data? Often I would be upset by this. And when I finally got over it, because I always got over it, I emerged slightly better than what I was before, because Raja pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. He had a way of bringing out the very best in me, and I think he had a way of bringing out the very best in all of us. To me, Raja was a friend, a very good friend. Like most good friends, Raja liked to pull the occasional prank. For example, Raja knew, like most everyone who I'm acquainted with knows, that I have a pretty serious dislike for onions. I'm not allergic or anything, I can just seriously do without them. So Raja would often invite me over to his house for a dinner that he had cooked, and as I started eating, Raja would say, Tyler, notice anything about the food? And I'd say, Raja, did you really sneak onions into the food again? And then he would laugh hysterically, that belly laugh that Raja had. Sometimes I noticed, most of the time I didn't, because Raja, as the great cook that he was, knew how to blend flavors masterfully. He was the only person that could slip onions into my food undetected. The point of the story is he was fun. He was lighthearted and fun, never took himself too seriously. To me, Raja was an inspiration, solid source of inspiration. And like most solid sources of inspiration, Raja not only made me aware of what was achievable scholastically, but importantly, what you could achieve in your personal life. Raja had many stories about the rich life that he lived. As I was talking about Raja with a friend, my friend asked, if you had lived the way that Raja lived, would you, Tyler, would you be okay with your own passing? And the answer without hesitation for me was yes. In all my sadness of my good friend Raja Paraserman's passing, it escaped me to consider the single most important fact. While he may be gone now, he truly lived a full life. He loved hard, traveled often, was able to see his girls become women, and he had the respect of everyone around him who he'd ever met. That's a good life. I'll miss my friend. I'll miss his humility, his friendship, his mentorship, and his warmth. I am appreciative of everything that he has done for me. I love him dearly, and I'll continue to honor him to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Will Joel Warm please come forward? Joel was not only friend and colleague, he was mentor to Raja.
Good morning. Raja was a very dear friend, and I'm grateful for the blessing I've had to know and to work with him. My first meeting with Raja occurred at a NATO conference on vigilance held in St. Vincent, Italy in August 1976, many years ago. The conference was chaired by Robert Mackey, and all of the most eminent vigilance researchers in the world were there, including Donald Broadbent, and E.C. Polton, and W.P. Calhoun, and Angus Craig, and Raja's mentor, Roy Davies, all from Great Britain, and Harry Jerrison, Jackson Beatty, Robert Kennedy, James O'Hanlon, John Sweats, and my mentors, Michelle Loeb and Earl Aloisi from the United States. That conference gave rise to Dr. Mackey's well-known edited book, Vigilance, Theory, Operational Performance, and Physiological Correlates. Raja attended as a newly minted PhD. He was tall and handsome and very quiet, sitting in the back of the lecture hall, listening intently to the talks for 3 days and saying very little. Then came his time to speak. He was the final presenter at the meeting. He gave a magnificent talk based on his dissertation research with the simultaneous successive task taxonomy that he developed. After he finished, most of us had the belief that here was the next leader of our field. That belief most certainly came true. Raja rescued the field of vigilance from a methodological and conceptual quandary that threatened to extinguish it. His resource model is one of the 2 dominant theories of vigilance at the current time, and his studies of the psychophysical, neurophysiological, psychogenetic, and stress factors underlying vigilance performance are the major elements of the vigilance literature at this time. In addition, his conception of neuroergonomics, the brain at work, provides a vital framework by which to integrate past and present data on the neurophysiology of vigilance performance and to stimulate new research in this field. In my view, no one has a larger imprint in the fabric of our understanding of vigilance than Raja Parasurman. I must note that Raja was not only a superb scientist, he was also a magnificent teacher and mentor, as we've just heard, who stimulated and guided his students to high achievement. He did that for colleagues and students from universities worldwide who met him as well. While Raja has gone to the great beyond, I'm sure that their memories of him, like mine, will be everlasting. My heart goes out to Raja's family. Hopefully this time of grief will pass and the sun will emerge for them soon again. They have my fond best wishes for the days ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Worm. Another one of Raja's favorite pieces is another Eva Cassidy called People Get Ready.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. Don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear Jesus a-humming. Don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. Yeah, yeah, yeah. People get ready for the train to Jordan, picking up past
Thank you. And now if Dr. Debbie Bain Davis will come forward.
For many years, Raja and I were ships that passed in the night. I first met him by phone when he called to talk to me about a job at Catholic University. But I said no. Then I tried to recruit him to Mason in the 1990s, and he said no. But I was persistent, and with apologies to Mark Seabrooks, his chair at Catholic University, who is here somewhere, in 2004, Raja did agree to come to George Mason. And over these past 11 years, I've had the opportunity to become acquainted in a more personal way with this remarkable, prolific scholar, mentor, and as several people have said, cook. Let me elaborate. Before Raja came to Mason, I used to wonder how he managed to be so prolific. And then he told me the secret. Not that it's helped me, but he did share his secret. He sent a newsletter that had a story about how he wrote so many papers. He reported that his method for writing was simple. If he planned to work on 15 papers with his research collaborators, he would open 15 files, and he would name each one. He claimed this was the most important step, starting a file, even if it had nothing in it. He then would jot down notes in one of the files, often he said as a conversation with himself about the paper, in what he called raw form, that is, typos and everything, until writer's block set in, which he claimed typically took less than a few sentences. But when that happened, he didn't fuss. He would just close that file and move on to one of the other open files. And he would just continue that until he ran out of ideas or out of time. Then he would go back several days or weeks later to the file and pick up where he left off. So that was it. Open, jot, close, repeat. And when Raja came to Mason, I saw him doing just that all the time. Almost without exception, when I passed Raja's office, he was at his desk on his laptop writing. He passed this love of writing on to his students through a mentoring program that combined his love of writing with his love of cooking. Starting when he was at Catholic and continuing it at Mason, he hosted writing workshop dinners at his home. 2 students would write a draft of a paper that they wanted to submit to a journal, and another 6 or so would read the papers. Over hors d'oeuvres, they discussed the first paper. Then everyone sat down to a dinner that Raja had cooked, and over dessert, they discussed the second paper. This program was so successful that others of us have started to host these dinners, although ours are never as popular as Raja's, for reasons you might imagine, both his writing and his cooking acumen. And in fact, Raja's mentoring extended to cooking. Well, at least it did for me. We had an evening where Raja had agreed to cook for all of the Human Factors faculty members, using my kitchen since it was a little bit larger than the one he had at the time. We were cooking chicken, and I was on duty to sear and cook the chicken strips on the stovetop. Now, I've always been afraid of burning food, so in my usual fashion, I was vigorously stirring the chicken in the pot. Raja, in the way that Raja does, came over and kind of looked over my shoulder and gently, very gently, pointed out that perhaps I should let the chicken get hot and cook before I started moving it around. So I've cooked chicken many times since that, and each time his advice comes to mind. I am blessed indeed to have gotten to know this prolific scholar, mentor, and cook. His scholarship has enriched my work, his mentorship has enriched my life, and his cooking expertise has expanded both my girth and my cooking repertoire. Raja, I'll miss you.
That's so beautiful. And so now Dr. Camilla Knott, representing 29 PhDs. Okay.
So I am the 19th of Raja's 29 students, and so it's a little bit of a tall order to represent 29 very good and very smart people, so I'll try. With just some stories and some notes from various students. I'm going to start with a story that shows just how brilliant and silly Raja was. So one of my dear friends, who shall remain nameless, was having one of those weeks that many of us had in grad school. So she decided to write her boyfriend at the time an email, and it went something like this. Dear John, I'm having the worst week ever. I have an exam tomorrow. I still have to get my reading list for comps ready. And Raja keeps asking, where's the data? Just so much to do, so I probably won't see you tonight. XOXO. Later that day, that same friend gets an email from Raja, and it says very simply, Dear, I'm quite certain that this email is not intended for me. Hugs, Raja. And that was the day that what we had all suspected to be true, that Raja was actually pretty silly, was confirmed. This next part is something that Ulla Metzger, one of Raja's postdocs, actually I think she was also a PhD student that he was an external advisor for. So this is from her. Raja was the best mentor I ever had. The 4 years I spent in his lab touched and changed my life forever. Raja had the great talent to bring together students and researchers from various fields and many countries to form a colorful team that could learn and benefit from each other in terms of their research, teamwork, and culture. Enduring collaborations and lasting friendships across research fields and countries are the result of this effort. As a mentor, he was always approachable. The way he accepted his graduate students as professionals was extremely motivating to me. He sent us to conferences to go out and mingle and to present our work to the world. At the same time, he was very supportive, encouraging and had a high degree of trust in us and in our work. He brought out the best in his students and postdocs. Nobody wanted to disappoint him, and everybody gave their best for him and themselves. I was always proud and felt honored to work for him. He became the ideal mentor to me. And yet he was very modest and humble. His hospitality was wonderful, his parties legendary, and his food delicious. What remains for us is to carry on in the spirit of Raja and try to make the world a little better, both professionally and personally. This next one is from Reshma Kumar. Somewhere in 2007, 2008, about a year and a half before I finished my PhD, when I was contemplating getting into human factors and was unsure if it would be the right decision, I talked to Raja every once in a while. I was initially scared to broach the subject because I knew he wanted me to stay in academia and cognitive neuroscience. He would listen as I presented pros and cons in a single breath, vacillating between the two as if I were deciding between fish or chicken. Finally, after a few such meetings, some involving undignified tears and nonsensical rationalizing on my part, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "You can do human factors." His confidence in my ability made me believe it too, and even today, years after that conversation, I still remember those words in times of doubt. So, I think that something that all of us know about Raja is that for him it was about surrounding yourself with good people, because it wasn't just about learning academically, but about learning from the world and others around you. It was about learning how to live and be good to each other. When I first moved back to DC a few years ago, Raja was one of the first ones to reach out to me And he did it repeatedly, and I was kind of puzzled by this. I wasn't sure why. I would have given up after the first or second phone call. And later, my good friend Erica Rovera revealed to me that she had said to Raja that I had a tendency to disappear from the world when things weren't quite right. And so I remember that first time I finally went over to Carol and Raja's home. It made me realize that I had people around me that would help me to be okay. And that night after dinner, we sat in their living room and talked a bit. But then Carol and Raja started playing music. I hadn't heard Raja play or sing until that night. And at one point, he and Carol sang a song that I hadn't heard before, but I fell in love with it. And really, I think I fell in love with them singing it because when I listened to the song later, even Bob Dylan didn't sound as good singing his own song. For now, though, I think Bob will have to do. He'll be good enough to take me back to that happy night. Turns out that song they sang is called You Ain't Going Nowhere, and I can't really help but think that it's, at least the title, is appropriate. Raja will always be with us. He's in our books, in our hearts, in our minds, who we are and what we do. And of course, we'll think of him always, especially when we find that really, really cool dive bar with the cheap red wine, live music, and of course, a makeshift sticky dance floor. So wherever you are, Raja, thank you for all of it.
It is so amazing hearing all of the different perspectives, all of the different perceptions, and they all have one thing in common, of course, and that's heart. And so, Evelina, a family friend, if you will come next, please.
Hi, my name is Evelina Francis. I come from a tribe that the government says doesn't exist any longer. We disappeared. The name of the tribe is in English, Kanoi, not Piscataway Kanoi. The tribe's name is Konokotik Obikonak. I am of the Kanawisi people. Kanawisi is Kanoi. When I first met Raja Parashuraman, he was one of the chosen guys coming to my house. Is this the guy? He sat back and looked at us. He said, "Oh, what are y'all looking at? You think you're gonna pick me as a husband for her? Oh, I do what I want to do." And all my friends, some of the girls looking from the kitchen, yeah, that's him. You see, because he told us, and that's all we were looking for was a guy to come up and say, get it back. I control this show with kindness. But he meant it, and we understood that. I mean, there's so much to talk about. That's why I'm last. But the thing is, he was more to us, to everybody here. None of you were any better than the other. None of you escaped his love. None of you stopped giving. His students, he wants all of you to continue to be more than just your work. I know you understand what I mean. True? Yeah. The music, the food, when you cook, remember him. All of you dancers and dive runners, remember him. Stick up a beer and say, hey, I don't care if you're 92, hit a dive once in a while. We all knew who he was. To all the women who loved him, now some of y'all, you know he couldn't love you back. Okay, but to some of y'all, and y'all know who you are, he loved you. And he loved you in a different way. It wasn't sexual, he loved you. It was beyond the world of, I got a cardinal dream. Okay? So, anyway, and to the closest women in his life, there's no need to have that discussion. You already know. And to the lovely ladies, girls of his heart, who he poured his heart into. Never doubt, never think, never even feel insecure that he's not going to have his love of spirit right beside you all the time. You know it. Always know it. To his professors and, his colleagues, you all know him. You knew him even when he was like, oh, gee. You knew him. You cared. He cared. Some hated, but that was okay too, because hate is like the form of love. Hate is that love thing. It's just that you can't place it where it belongs. So he knows how I feel. I'm going to miss him and stuff. So I figure, some of the stuff that I wear, I want to wear it so y'all can see me. And he wants me to wear it too. Oh, what's mine there? In my tribe, I know some of my language, and I know old songs that were given to me as a child. And I'd like to sing two of them, one for Raja and one for you all and myself. He's like, no minna, ushne, ikini wana homa he, ishne na me, hapu na me, ishnola gochmena. Yonane, weye nane, hipu nane hoya hene, oshna, unamna yele, hinetowa heya he. Tawane cheche lawo, ichina wa tichole he na ho yawe, inena ho yo he ya he, ichino he ya he ho oh na na ye yo. The other one is like, when I gotta stop, you would cry. You got the little drum? Succeed, English, right? Always remember him. Never forget. Light a candle. Remember Jimi Hendrix. All you gotta do is, one day you'll be walking, this song, I don't know. And then, here he comes, Hendrix. All you gotta do is say, okay, I'm fine, I know it. I'm fine. All of you knew him for every song, for everything. Each of us knew him for the same thing. Love, kindness, respect. He'd jerk you a little bit. But that's what we needed. One day I was depressed. Well, I thought I was. I stopped by. Roger had this kind of pit house. He knows I like reggae. So he says, Evelina, why don't you go downstairs and relax? I go downstairs, go down the spiral, I get in there. Music comes on. He leans over. Hungry? That's it. You know him. So we're going to cry sometime, but he wants you to continue in everything that you do, everything that you have done. You are all a family. Don't forget each other. These girls, they haven't lost a father. From the youngest of you, they have gained a father. They don't have to call the psychiatrist. They have fathers. They have mothers. When the mother is sad, they can call you and say, Mom needs help, or my stepmom needs help. Come. Somebody will, I know, will come. But there's a lot of dads in here, and I know you want to step up to it. So go right ahead. You see? But just know, these are strong girls. I tell you, something else. Ooh. So I think that's enough, isn't it? Huh? All right. So I just passed a little more. Oh, and thank you so much. Yeah. Because when you start talking, I could feel it. Yeah. I could feel in my heart, somewhere all around. So, well, I'm kind of blind, so I can't see your faces, but I can feel you. So that's good. But I know you're all there. It just looks like I can see because I don't give up either. All right.
Oh, thank you so much, Evelina. And so our final speaker is Dr. Peter Hancock. With shades on, huh?
Good morning. For Raja, 2 poems and some memories. They're short, not too much. With rue my heart is laden for golden friends I had, for many a rose-lipped maiden and many a light-foot lad. By streams too broad for leaping, the light-foot boys are laid. The rose-lipped girls are sleeping in fields where roses fade. Some memories. I think what I remember most about Raja Parasurm was the way his shoulders used to bounce up and down when he laughed. I remember the fact that he wielded a pool cue wasn't just an instrument of play, it was a pedagogical tool. And around the pool table, as we made point after point in science, you saw his students pay attention, and I wonder how much we all learned from the tip as it weaved its way across the magic. I remember the hills of Les Arcs in France, the French Alps, and our titanic battle of squash. Him, all elegance, all grace. Myself, some dogged tenacity, and surely that's an ever-growing and living metaphor for our scientific relationship across the decades. I was always so fascinated by the fact that this native of the Indian subcontinent was so much more effortlessly and magically English than I was. How did that happen? He needed no royal titles to command our respect, which were always freely and very deservedly given. I treasure the times when, fired up by some concept or issue, the register of his voice would go up and he would start a momentary slip into a high-pitched squeak of excitement, and suddenly he would drop several registers, retrenching back to the gravitas that he knew he ought to have for himself. But that smile never slipped through the whole sequence. I had thought we would live, we would learn, and we would laugh together throughout my lifetime. I was wrong. There are a few things that make human life tolerable, but surely among these, friendship is the most valuable. And he was my friend. I cannot yet bring myself to give thanks for the life that was well lived and which is now done with. And I don't know whether I ever will. But I will read a poem for Raja one last time. When I am stranded on death's final shore, marooned by tides of life at lowest ebb, then shall I think of thee one last time more, and of that scythed man a favour beg. One moment's thought I will of him entreat, a dying contemplation to behold, that on a further strand we soon may meet, beyond that rugged trench of narrow cold. For of that echoed hope the merest chance beleaguers and beguiles my final breath. Then will I go with not one backward glance, embracing and yea loving cruel death. Though bitter is the parting of his soul, its final destination makes us whole. Today, I am sad to say, it is he who is gone, but sadly, it is we who are lost.
So just take a moment and allow all of these different sharings, the different perceptions, the different perspectives of this amazing individual. And the bond was love, the bond was wisdom, the bond was strength and intelligence and love, always woven back into it. Whether the love was spoken in kind words, or whether this love was spoken calling somebody up to their highest, the bond was love. And so in a gathering like this, we are particularly aware of the influence that he had on so many lives. And we are saddened at the thought that something precious has gone. As we have heard, no matter how handsome he was, it was not the outer face or form that prompted us to come together for this celebration of his life. Rather, it was the inner qualities of love, wit, wisdom, intelligence, passion, exactitude, joy, all of those, all within one amazing individual. And so honoring the transformative nature of Raja, there's a side of him that hasn't been mentioned, and that is that he did have a favorite Bible verse. And the Bible verse that he particularly liked was of Jesus' miracle of transforming water into wine. And none of us could figure out if it was about the water and the wine, or the transformative nature of what had been done. However, whichever perspective of that one might take, Raja loved his wine. He really did. And he loved all kinds of, different grades of wine, but mostly it was about that ability to celebrate, to acknowledge in the moment something worth acknowledging. And in listening to all of the people who have spoken, each individual that was touched by his life, touched by Raja, felt acknowledged. They were seen, they were heard, they mattered. And so as time goes on and it becomes quiet after his going, and after the people are no longer milling around so swiftly, that's the point at which each one is called to step back up and remember the family, remember to see them, to hear them, to be present with them. And so as we are acknowledging how deeply and graciously he shared of his culinary talents and his wine, just take a moment. You don't have to actually raise your hand, but take a moment to form your own toast to this magnificent individual. And so join me in that moment of what is the greatest toast you could give. Later on this afternoon, you may have a chance to actually toast him. And so hold that toast. And as the grad students have probably shared with you, there are memory cards around. Perhaps write that toast that just came to mind on a memory card. And be sure to put your name on it so that when family is going through the memory cards that'll be in the back, you're asked to put it in the basket. As you are doing that, write those toasts, write those memories, so the family can go through them later and create a book of memories. The memories of people that they may have only once encountered or many times. And so it was Raja was a transformative force in the universe. He was that presence in which there was an alchemy, there was a shift in the people around him, when each one came to a higher and a better expression, a more deeper and fuller expression of themselves. And so as each one of us moves through our own lives, imagine being that gift to other people, that gift that brings out the best. From the music Wicked, there's a song, and I thought it really appropriate for him, and that is, I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow, if we let them, and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm one who am today better because I knew him. I didn't have that privilege, but each one of you can utter those words. I am better because I knew him. And the question is, who can say if I've been changed for the better, but I know I've been changed for the good? So, as Tyler mentioned earlier, Raja was definitely a success, and Ralph Waldo Emerson's statement of, or definition of success, really fits, and that is to laugh often and love much, to win the respect of intelligent persons and the affection of children, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to give of oneself, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to have played and laughed with enthusiasm and sung with exultation, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. Raja was enormously successful. And so spirit doesn't die, forms come and go, but spirit does not die. God is life. What we call death is a transition, a transformation that we all make. It is part of our evolution, an event that takes place in the total process of life. Realizing this increases our capacity to understand the event we call death. Just as no one made an effort to hold Raja back when he was a baby, or to stop him from becoming a child, or when the child became an adolescent, and then on to becoming the dynamic individual known to so many, we must now not try to hold him back in our thoughts from moving into his next life expression. Being confident that the way of the soul is ever evolving does not erase the sense of emptiness that family and friends naturally feel now that Raja is not physically here. We now share this rich experience because of Raja and honor the memory. And now is the time when we particularly need to support one another. Now is the time when that extra phone call, when somebody comes, when some friend or family member comes to mind, don't just leave it as a passing thought. Pick up the phone, pop a text, pop an email, something that lets everyone else know that He is so present, and that they are so present in your life. Because during the first intense period after someone passes, there are a lot of people around. And then in a little while it gets quiet. It gets incredibly quiet. And those are the times, particularly for family and friends, when your reach, your touch, your little extra effort may transform their whole day. So remember, don't just think, act on it. And so we rest in faith in God, who brought Raja into this physical world, into our lives. We know certainly that he has provided an even more glorious expression next for this beloved father, husband, colleague, mentor, friend, cook. So, as I reminded you about the memory bowl, also there is a reception this afternoon following this service. There's a brief reception here and then at the pub. Can you imagine why there would be one at a pub? Speaking of imagine, it was one of his favorites.
Try.
It was his passion for oneness, his knowing that the world can live as one, that he was driven, he was committed, that there would be transformation of population. And so please join me in a farewell prayer. Let us be still for a moment, filling our minds and hearts with the understanding that brings us the luminous calm of peace. As we enter a moment of silence to bid farewell to our beloved individually in our own ways, in our own teachings, in our own philosophy. And so it is now time for us to release him to his next magnificent expression, whatever that next step is. Ever-present God, source of all, we open our minds and hearts to thee. Thy divine love pours its healing balm upon all grieving hearts. Death is but a shadow on the path of life, and wherever the path may lead, we know that love, the demonstration of spirit in the world, is always present. And so may all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings awaken to the light of their true nature. May all beings be free. And so we join Raja in quoting Jimi Hendrix. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. My privilege.
Listening to the speakers and just chatting with folks this morning, everyone has a special relationship with them.
Yeah.
I was hearing them. I didn't know that about him.
It's amazing what we learn. Isn't that the greatest?
One of the remembrances of the online book. Someone met him at a party. Just took him as someone was invited or to cook. He was invited because he was cooking, and to find out the day after. Oh, that Raja.
That
Raja. They're so humble like that.
Amazing. Transformed. That phrase that so many of us desire, that to be a transformative force in the universe, to make a difference so that others may have a richer existence. And he did it. He did it so well.
He did.
I don't know if you saw himself that way. Maybe one of those things that you try to do that.